And we're recording. So my name's Tracy Warren. I'm the managing director of eWomenNetwork, Snohomish County. And I'm doing these blabs twice a week to introduce you to our phenomenal members. And today, NJ Shelsby, she is a productivity coach. I was actually just on her website reading about NFSM, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But thank you, NJ, for taking some time today. So I know your business has gone through some different iterations, as all of our businesses do. So what are you up to now, and how are you impacting the business owners you work with?
Sure. Right now, I am focused on working with the overachievers who have reached that certain age where they start to realize that there's more to life than just work, and they want more quality of life, a whole life, but they're kind of stuck because years of putting in the long hours, their brain is literally wired for working long hours. And so even though they want to work less, they still find themselves taking client calls on vacation or checking their email during date night when their husband goes to the bathroom or something like that. And so I am working with these professionals to rewire their brains so that it's really easy to make those changes that allow them to work less hours.
Well, I love what you just said, because you said whole life. And I'm wondering if that's intentional, like using the phrase whole life instead of balance.
Yes, it really is. I mean, you know, this whole, we've strived for balance for how many years now? That's been the catchphrase. And that's not what it is. You know, you don't spend the same number of hours doing all of these things, but it's about having things that are really important to you in your life, that whole life, that your health is not sacrificed. You know, they say that the quality of your happiness is determined by the quality of your relationships. And so that doesn't mean that you spend the same amount of time when your relationships is working on your business, but it's about having that, all of that in your life.
No, I love that. Like whole life is something I can, because that makes sense, right? Like there's the whole work hard, play hard. Like,
right.
There should be, and I hear all sorts of people saying balance is the biggest lie. And, but it's not about, like, it's not a teeter totter. And I think that's where we get confused.
Right.
Like, yeah. So
yeah, like there's that that wheel thing that coaches have been doing for 15 years, like you're measuring it all to be even. And it's not like that. It's just about knowing what is the critical components and making space for them in your life.
So was there something specific that happened in your training or just in your work with people that really made you see that? Like, is that a tool you've ever used in your business?
Yeah. So, you know, I come from the corporate world and I worked my ass off. I was the, you know, overachieving type A personality that I lost connections with the people in my life. And I went through a period towards the end of 2001 where my father died, my marriage fell apart. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and I started having stress-induced memory loss. And so I left the corporate world, and that's when I started coaching. And I found that I actually worked more hours now that I didn't have that end of the day thing. And so I was on this quest, and I studied, you know, productivity, which I was a student of Franklin Covey for many, many years. So I'm going back like 26 years ago and studying, you know, all the different productivity apps and looking at personal development and spiritual practices and woo-woo techniques and neuroscience. And one day I had this aha that the problem wasn't out there. It was in me, that my unconscious brain was sabotaging me implementing all of these things that I learned that if I implemented them, yes, they would help me, but my brain wouldn't let me implement them because of programming. Like, when I was 5 and I was, my sister, she was 10 years older and liked to play mom, and caught me talking to friends before I did my chores. And just that shaming that I felt like I had this programming that I couldn't play until all the work was done. Well, as a business owner, all the work is never done.
Never.
And so identifying things like this that were going on in my unconscious mind, and then just, using the tools that I developed in the corporate world of problem solving, process improvement, root cause analysis, that I just went through everything and analyzed to figure out how to solve this. And that's where I developed the neurofocus shift method. And it's a way that I used first on me to be able to make those changes and rewire my brain so that I could do the things that I knew would make a difference. And then I started using it on clients, and I find that in one session we can get tremendous results. And I mean, even just 3 sessions, I have seen clients have, more peace and less stress and more connection to family. And yet still, in only 3 sessions, their income increases.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So productivity. Let's talk a little bit about productivity. What do you think are the biggest productivity killers for entrepreneurs?
Yeah. Well, I think that there are two main problems. The first one is we work against our brain instead of with it. So think of a race car, right? A manual transmission, and if you shift gears at the right time, then you have this amazing acceleration. But the same car and somebody who shifts too early, you don't have that power. And so your brain is the same way. If you're not using it right, you're really losing a lot of the performance. So that is the first problem. And the other one is not focusing your time on the right things. Our unconscious mind hijacks our focus so that even though we intend to do these great things that will make a difference, we end up spending the majority of our day in the minutia.
So how do you define minutia?
I define minutia as anything that's not those things that support your goals and those things that support having a whole life. Everything else is really minutia.
So it can really be different things for different people.
Exactly, right. And, one of the things that is really important to do is scheduling your tasks in your calendar instead of using a task list. And it's really important because those 2 important things, your goals and your, those things that support whole living, if you don't schedule them, they never happen.
Right.
The minutia, if you don't schedule it, it takes over your entire day.
Right. I'm adding I'm putting your website down here so that people who come back and watch later can go check you out online. Those things end up being the minutia of my day. Oh, wait, here, I need to create. And I have a virtual assistant, and this week she emailed me, and the subject line was, "Are you busy?" And then in big, huge, all caps, it said, "Of course you're busy. What can I take off your plate?" Because I kind of told her that every time she emails me, I can think of things to give her. Right. But if she doesn't email me, it's out of sight is out of mind.
Right.
So then I'm finding all sorts of creative ways to put her to work, which is, it's kind of like a game to me.
Right.
And I feel like I have little elves.
It's interesting what you said about that stuff consuming your day, because there's a really interesting thing that we don't realize. There's this thing called task switching or multitasking, but this idea of your brain shifting from one thing to the next, because multitasking, we don't really do two things. They've done brain scans, and really your brain is rapidly shifting back and forth between two things. So that's very rapidly shifting. But even at a slower scale, that you check your email and you answer one email and then another one, and then you're answering a text message, or, you know, different things that you're doing, that your brain is having to switch from one thing to the other.
Right.
That takes a lot of effort for your brain, because it has to dump everything out of the short-term memory, reload in all the things around the new thing that you're focusing on, and then the next thing comes up and it has to dump it all out and then refocus. And studies have shown that you lose like up to 75% of your time.
Wow.
With how long it takes for your brain to come back up to speed. Yeah. But also, you know how at the end of the day, when your brain is just fatigued and you just feel like you can't do another thing that requires your brain, that is what causes that. So if instead of switching back and forth between tasks, if you schedule blocks of time to focus on one thing at a time, you don't have that fatigue at the end of the day.
I had that fatigue at the end of the day the other day, but it's because I spent nearly 4 hours in conversation. Yeah. I did one of these. I was interviewed for a podcast. Yeah. And by the end of the day, I was like, okay. Yeah. Because in conversation, you're switching your brain all the time. Well, and I'm reading The One Thing by Gary Keller, I believe. And he talks a little about this. Like when you leave a task, you don't jump right back into the task. You have to ramp back up to the task.
Exactly.
So calendar blocking it sounds like that's a very important strategy that you work with your clients. So what kind of pushback do you get on that?
The way that I work with clients is that before we try to implement a strategy, we work on the inner stuff that resists the strategy. So for example, I worked with somebody the other day who has to do it all because no one else can do it as well. And the idea of not trying to do everything herself just wasn't even something that she could wrap her head around. And we spent about 45 minutes doing some work to clear through that. And then at the end, it's like, okay, so how do you feel about it now? And it was just like, oh, no problem. Let's go. And this has been a lifetime since high school is really when it started. And now she's, mid-30s. And just like that, it made it easy to shift that from that habit that wasn't supporting her. Because we all know that if you try to do it all, you're not going to succeed. But if you have that need to do it all yourself, it's hard to make that change until you work on that unconscious stuff that's driving that.
Well, and I remember once, so freedom is very important to me when I think about what I'm doing in my business and why I'm doing it. And so I remember a few years ago trying to block my calendar, and it felt so constricting.
Right. Yeah.
And then I talked to somebody probably about a year ago, or she was sharing her story about how it was very freeing to know exactly what she was going to do.
Right.
And my brain started to shift. I'm like, okay. I think the other challenge that I come up against is I over schedule. I over put other things in.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, whoa.
Right.
Like today I had 2 things on my calendar, and I'm like, I needed to have 2 things on my calendar today because the last 3 days have been packed.
Right. And it's interesting because we pack our calendar because we have this need to get more done. And I find that taking a day off and doing nothing, the next day I get more things done than I did in previous 3 days.
Yeah, I did this group coaching thing with someone recently, and she was like, Tracy, you have to take 24 hours off.
Yeah.
And then of course I get legalistic around it. I'm like, so I could take noon Saturday off until noon Sunday. And she's like, no, like a full day.
Yeah.
And so I've almost every Sunday not done any work.
Good.
And it's like, wow, okay. Because if I figure out I can take one, then I can take more, right? Because I think that's the other, that's the challenge of entrepreneurship is, wait a minute.
Yeah.
How do I take vacation time? And
here's an additional challenge for you. One of the things that we struggle with is with social media, text messages, email, is that it's a dopamine hit. We get addicted to that dopamine, that little rush that you get from those certain emails that has something that's funny or interesting, or that's a connection to someone or something like that. And so it actually is an addiction. But if you go 24 hours without feeding that, then things start to change. And so if in that 24 hours that you're not working, if you put your phone away and you don't look at text messages, don't look at social media, we call it in our house like this technology break, that we go 24 hours, no TV, no cell phones, nothing. And it is amazing what it can do for you, because it changes your brain chemistry going 24 hours without all those dopamine hits from the electronics.
I met with a gal today, and she's doing this thing called the Coloring Project. And she had her postcards that are all like mandala type things where you get to color it in. And she had them out at the tables at this event last Friday. And people came up to her afterwards and said, you know, I was coloring during the event and I learned more.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that is, I mean, I colored the whole time too. Like I colored my little thing.
Right.
But the idea that getting out of our brain, getting away from that tech, and that, you know, I've got a teenager. I've got two kids that are strapped to their tech.
Yeah. And
yet it's funny. The other day on my Facebook page, I asked how many people leave their ringer off overnight. Wow. And what was kind of remarkable is of the 20 or so people who commented, almost all of them said they leave their ringer off all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I leave my ringer off all the time. And from a certain time at night, I don't even remember what time it's set up now, but it goes into do not disturb mode. So unless like one of my favorites calls twice or something like that, it doesn't beep or buzz or anything like that until, you know, the next morning at some time.
Yeah, that's the challenge with my phone, right? My ringer's off most of the time because if my ringer's on, it never stops making noise.
And that's another, you asked about the productivity challenges of entrepreneurs, that constant distraction from every single app that we have has these alerts and buzzes. And it's funny because we live in this connected world. And so an appointment will come up and I will have it ding in like 4 different places, you know? And they're not all timed at the same time, it seems like. And so we have to be really careful about all of that. And I have to, every time I set one up, it seems like it's a default that, you know, the default notifications come on, and then I have to go in, find the notifications for that app, and then shut them off because it really will distract our brains.
What I love is I'll hand my phone, I take my phone and I hand it to my daughter and say, could you turn off all my notifications? It's easier for her to do it. She can find it. She thinks I'm being ridiculous. But so how do people work with you? I mean, you said in 3 sessions, but do they work with you for 6 months, or how does that? How do people work with you?
Yeah, so there's 3 ways to work with me, either one-on-one or as part of group coaching, or I do periodic classes. And so you can take one of those classes to work with me. And as far as one-on-one, you can do 1 session at a time, or you can do, like 3-session packages, or some people, they just want that longer term. It's not really necessary. I have clients that I've been seeing for, over a year, and, they got dramatic improvement in the first 3 months, and yet it's still at something that grounding, and they're continuing to grow. So it depends on, what each person feels like they need. But, I find that in 1 session, shifts can be made. And certainly in 3 sessions, that we can make a lot of progress towards de-stressing, having systems set up. I mean, there's only a couple of things that you really need to do differently to dramatically increase your productivity. The problem is it's so hard to implement them unless you go in and rewire the brain. And so we can do that very quickly. And so in 3 sessions, you can feel less stressed, more peaceful, and, probably even make more money.
Right. How do you meet in person? Is it all virtual? What does that look like?
I have some clients that like to meet me face to face and come to my house, but a lot of the work that I do is on the phone.
Okay. Interesting. So, wait, I have my list of questions. I have 2 computers. Remember you heard there was the echo? Thankfully, are you having audio problems? And I clicked it. It said you have 2 blab windows open. And sure enough, that was why. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. So we talked about the challenges. Did we talk about time wasters? What are the biggest things that you've seen as time wasters for people?
Looking at their phone first thing in the morning when they wake up, because it kind of sets the stage for the whole day and gets you off track. Constantly checking email, not having that focused blocks of time to do different things where you're doing that task shifting back and forth, not silencing notifications and alarms so that you have all of those distractions. I find that one of the most productive things that you can do is to schedule 90 minutes in the morning to work on things to support your 90-day goals. And I find that if you do that, even if the whole rest of your day goes to hell, you still, at the end of the day, you've gotten something accomplished, right? And you feel productive and you're making progress on your goals. So in 3 months, you're going to really be somewhere different.
What does a typical day look like for you?
Well, I like to wake up early. And so like 5:36, I don't use an alarm. I get up whenever my body has had enough sleep. And then I like to spend some downtime, start my day slow. So I generally go out. If it's cold, I'll put the fireplace on, or I just sit in front of the fireplace and I'll do my gratitude journal and just kind of get in touch with my bigger vision and things that I want to do. And I'll meditate, and then I might go down onto the treadmill and I put on some kind of something that feeds the brain. So I like the videos from the Philosopher's Notes, that it's like summaries of personal development books. Cool. It just helps to get me in the right state of mind. And then after I do that, I'll have a smoothie and for my breakfast, and then I get started based upon what I planned in my day the night before.
So thank you for saying that. So you plan. Is that how you end your work day?
That is how I end a day. That, if you do it in the morning when you start, you tend to be thinking about it all night long, and it interferes with your sleep. And it's easy to get distracted because you have to look in your email to see what's there. And it's very easy to start planning your day and then get off doing things and never get the plan finished. And so if at the end of the day, you go through and look at what still has to be done, and there's kind of it's important that you start with things that support your goals and your whole life, and then look at the minutia. That's the emails and from your task list, open projects, that kind of a thing. And then create this plan and schedule it.
So my husband last night, it was like 10 o'clock, and he said, "Hey, did you get the email I sent you today?" And I said, "I haven't been home." And he said, "Well, don't you have email on your phone?" I'm like, "I do, but I don't check it while I'm out."
Good.
And I said, "Is it okay if I just check it tomorrow? Because I don't want to open my email right before bed."
Right. Yeah.
Right. So something else just came up while you were talking. Oh, okay. So let's talk about networking, because this is a... Do you have a pile of business cards on your desk?
I do not.
Okay. So tell me why, or tell me what what's your tip or trick, or what do you do with those business cards when you network?
They are in my contacts, and and I've connected with those people on Facebook.
Okay. So do you use a CRM, or do you just use what do you use?
I just use my contacts.
Okay. In Outlook or something?
Right. Well, I don't use Outlook. I use the contacts on my Mac.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to love Outlook back, for many years. But after like 2003, it seems like each version gets worse and worse. And so.
Yeah. Well, and I should have asked you if you were a Mac person or a PC person, because typically the Mac people are going to use the Mac product.
I'm actually both.
Okay.
I run Parallels on my Mac, and I still have to go into that. I have two PCs and a Mac. I have a Surface and an iPad. So I feel like I live in both worlds.
Yeah. Which is probably, I bet that allows you to provide better coaching.
Yeah, it does.
In some ways.
Yeah. And so, and you talked about, the email and the, the productivity wasters and that kind of a thing. And I tell you, one is email, where the time that is spent reviewing your inbox and re-looking at the same emails over and over and over again. And I think that is one of the biggest time wasters. And so I get that stuff out of my email inbox. Typically once a week, I get to inbox 0. And the way that I do that is the emails that it's not time to take action on yet.
Yeah.
I have them leave my inbox, scheduled to come back at a later date, so that they're not sitting there to be looked at until I need to do something with them.
That's a good idea. I was just laughing because you posted on Facebook that one time you got your inbox to 0, and I replied snarkily like, I should send you something. So how much when it comes to email, what is your best tip for, do you go in there twice a day? How do you process your email?
And it depends. I try to only go in a couple of times a day. Right now, I am working on a festival. It's called Duval Days here in Duval, that it's in a little over a week, next Saturday. And so there's all kinds of last minute things. Yeah. And so I'm in there more now than I typically would be, just because things need immediate responses. And so, but I'm not looking at everything, and there's not all of this stuff in there that I have to review. It's just those, and I'm able to respond, get them out of there. I like Gmail over Outlook because I don't use the tabs that is the standard default. I implement what's called priority inbox. And so I have my important, starred, and then everything else. And so everything else is hidden. And I just have the ones that I've trained Gmail to say is important. And so I'm not seeing all of the emails coming in. So it's not as big of a distraction.
Okay.
But outside of this project that needs immediate responses,
right.
Yeah, I would go, nose down for like 90 minutes and work on something. And then I might, check in and see if there's any emails to deal with.
I find, I don't like, even yesterday being away from the computer all day, I feel like I get so few emails that are important, right? I get a lot of crap,
right?
But I don't get a ton that need immediate response. Even phone calls, yeah. I'm not getting a ton. That reminds me, I have a phone call to make after I hang up here. But yeah, it's interesting. And I do have some weird notification thing happening on my computer where every time I get an email, something comes in the bottom corner.
Oh, yeah.
And so I get this, who it's from and the subject line.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I just have to close Outlook altogether.
Right. Yeah.
Because,
see, and that's the problem, because I don't get those notifications. And even if I'm in my inbox, all of those unimportant emails, I don't see them.
Yeah,
like once a week, I will go in and go through and see if there's anything that accidentally got filtered in there and deal with them. And then once every, maybe once a quarter, I'll go in and just delete all that stuff out so that it's not there anymore.
Yeah. I use a program called SaneBox.
Yeah.
And it allows me to train my contacts too.
Right. SaneBox also does that, where you can send it out of your inbox and come back to at another time.
Yeah, I need to, you said that and like this light bulb went off in my brain, like, oh, because that inbox feels like a to-do list.
Right.
And I don't,
Right. It's somebody else's to-do list for you.
Right.
And for Outlook, I recommend SaneBox for that. And if you're using the Gmail client, which I think works a lot better than Outlook. I was resistant to go away from Outlook, and my tech person sent me an article, and it's like, all right, look at this. And when I looked at that and all that I could do with Gmail client that I couldn't do with Outlook, I'm like, all right, you convinced me. And so with Gmail, I use something called Boomerang. Yeah,
Debbie Whitlock showed us Boomerang on a call last week. Well, and so I'm in a position right now where I use Google Calendar.
Yeah.
And I use Outlook for email. And my business coach is like, Tracy, you need to pick one and put them all together.
Yes. And they all integrate these days. I mean, I have, I do some consulting work for Microsoft, and I have that on an Outlook calendar or an Office 365. And I just pull that into my Gmail, and I have my calendar on my Mac. I pull that into Gmail. And then I have about 3 Gmail calendars. I have, my own personal one. I have one that I have shared with my husband when, there are things that both of us need to go to. And I have that pulled in there. And then I have like a marketing calendar that I create that is also pulled in. And it just all shows up in the same Gmail account.
Okay. Well, we have all of our stuff together. Like my daughter puts her work schedule in our combined Google Calendar so that we know what's going on. And
in your Google Calendar, or does she have her own and then you also see that?
Yes. The second thing.
Okay.
She has her own, and so she puts items in there when it matters to us, like band stuff and then and with my husband and I, like, we share totally, which is fine. I would rather just share the evening stuff. Yeah. The stuff that I know there's going to be a conflict type thing. Right. But anyway, it works the way it does. And to me, merging them is tech, and I'm so resistant. That's where I'm like, okay, I gave my VA my Google password yesterday, and Google did not like that one little bit because she's in Virginia.
Right. Yeah.
And so I had to, they're like, we've detected suspicious activity. Right. I'm like, okay. But that's a task I'll give her to do. Like, seriously, can you just, that's why I gave her my Google Calendar, is I was having her set up time trade for me, because that hurts my brain.
So there's two things that have occurred to me since talking that I wanted to share. Please. So one is that another thing that fatigues the brain is keeping everything in your head. You said, oh, that just reminded me I have to make a phone call.
Yeah.
It is really bad keeping everything in your brain, because your brain, trying to protect you from forgetting something, keeps circling around and around and coming back. And it generally reminds you at the wrong time. It'll distract you from something that you're trying to focus on to save you and protect you from forgetting it. So you really want to get that out of your head. And in fact, at the times when we are most overwhelmed and stressed, just the simple exercise of doing a brain dump and writing everything down that you have to do, and then going back and saying, okay, 1 star, these are the things that I have to do in, the next week. These are the things that I have to do in the next 48 hours, 2 stars. And then 3 stars, these are the things I have to do today. And that allows your brain to stop worrying about the things that you don't have to get done today. So that was the one thing. The other thing is, the old trick that they tell you about with like remembering numbers, that to put them in groups because our brains don't remember long strings very well. Well, the same thing with keeping track of what we have to do from the different places, our input zones. So the normal person, if you counted them all up, has about 20 or more places. So email. And if you have more than one account that you have to go in and look at, as opposed to having them all funnel into one, each one counts as a different one. Skype messaging, text messaging, Facebook messaging, piles of papers on your desk to remind you, sticky notes, and each pile being a different input zone. And if you add all of those up, it means your brain is just fried, just consumed with trying to keep track of all the different places that you have something to do. And so if you minimize that down to 6 or less, you will find this very freeing thing that happens with your brain, that it doesn't have to worry about keeping track of all of those places. And I'll use things like, I have my voicemail in my phone automatically sent to a Google Voice account that transcribes it and emails it to my phone. So I never have to check my voicemail. I'll use things like Zapier in order to automatically send things from different apps into one that I check. I have a basket that is like, nice and big, that everything, all the papers that come in, it goes in that basket. And then I just have this regular time that I go through that basket and find what I need to take action on and schedule it as part of my, my calendar. But until that time, I forget about it. It's not a pile of papers on my desk to, think about. If there's papers on my desk, that's stuff that I'm actively working on now.
So I just have to say hello. Oh, she left. Okay. Debbie Whitlock came in and then she left. I didn't get a chance to say hello to her. Okay. That's all right. Let me just be a little honest. This whole eWomenNetwork blab thing, I'm kind of trying to keep it on the down low to some extent, because I'm experimenting, right? I'm experimenting with growing the reach of the members in the chapter, which is why I started this. Like, first of all, I get to know you better, which is awesome. Like, holy crud, people need to know you and Jay Shelsby. So I've been sharing it on Facebook, but kind of quietly. And it was funny because another managing director reached out to me last week, and she's like, all right, what are you doing? I'm like, let's talk on the phone. And because I want to just, this is me leveraging my members, and it's a value add, right? So after today, we're done, which will be shortly, I will upload this to YouTube, and it's on YouTube forever, right? So it's this other way for people to get to know you. And anyway, I digress. And I am a paper piler. I'm a Post-it note girl. But I love what you just said about if you could get it down to 6.
Yeah.
Like, I could probably get it down to 6, right?
Yeah. And then you just have a regular part of your schedule that you check those places to see if there's anything new that needs to be done. But it allows you the majority of the time to stay focused on what's most important, right, and allow that stuff to accumulate and not even thinking about it, because you know it's not going to be forgotten because you have a system that you go and you check that pile.
Right. Well, and I feel like even you saying that out loud, what I'm thinking is I should probably remove Facebook Messenger from my phone. Yeah. Right? Because I get the little people popping up on my screen. I don't have one right now, but well, and the way Facebook is, it makes it look like I'm there all the time, and I'm not. Right. And I don't know why that is, but people will send me, hi. I'm like, ah. Right. I often think of Franklin Covey did the 7 Habits, right?
Stephen Covey did the 7 Habits, and Franklin Quest did the time near the productivity pyramid, and then the 2 companies merged, and you had Franklin Covey.
So I think about Stephen Covey when I think about social media and cell phones, because he's dead, right? Like, yes. He is probably rolling over in his grave, because cell phones and social media make everything urgent and important when it's really not.
Right. It's not. And because of that urgency, it's a dopamine hit that we get addicted to.
You said that like in one of the first sentences you said, and I kind of like, huh. And then, right, like you hear email productivity people say their number 1 tip is, if you want less emails, send less emails. And I'm like, okay, I hear that. And frankly, like, seriously, that's just not.
And I don't agree with that, because email is a communication tool. And I think it's important to email people and to reach out to them. That is not the way to do it. It's about not staying in your inbox looking for what to do, and not wasting your time going and reviewing the same emails over and over again in your inbox. You go into your inbox and you spend, 5-10 minutes responding to emails that are in there, and actually taking the action and removing the ones, whether you archive it, delete it, whether you defer it for another day because now's not the time to make decision on it. If you don't have time to take action on it, why have it sitting there to get buried in your inbox, right? I mean, people lose things because it gets so far down. That never happens to me. If I'm not responding to your email, I'm either, head down on something that I don't have the time to work on it, or you ended up in my spam filter, and otherwise your email will be responded to within 24 hours, or I'll schedule it for a time, something like you asked me for some information, and it's like, okay, I know I'm on a deadline on some other things. Yep. This isn't needed right away. So, I can boomerang it for 4 days.
Yeah. Oh gosh, thought came in my brain, thought exited my brain. I had a thought about what you just said. Even this weekend. So that email that I sent to you and 2 other people, I wrote it on Saturday, and I told it to delay send.
Right. Yeah.
That whole idea that, I mean, I don't want people to believe, oh, I know what I was going to tell you. So I had the weirdest introduction this week on email. So I got an introduction. It was at 8 p.m. the other night. Okay, 8 p.m. 5 minutes later, the assistant replied and said, oh, I would love to set up a time for you to talk to Chris. Okay. 8 p.m. I'm not checking my email at 8 p.m. Okay. Next morning, 7:42 a.m., I get another email from the assistant. Hey, just checking in to see if you're available today. 10 o'clock, I get another email from the assistant. Like, hey,
Wow.
haven't heard back from you. I'm like, whoa, like,
Wow.
whoa.
Wow. Yeah.
I didn't see any of the emails except the 10 o'clock one because I hadn't checked my email yet.
Right. Which is a good thing. I'm proud of you.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's that whole idea. You really do train people how to treat you.
You do.
And when you respond to email like that, they're like, oh, great.
Yeah.
She responds to email really fast. But I'm sure that I have trained some of my people that I respond to Facebook Messenger pretty quickly.
Right. Yeah.
And
you trained me that that's how you respond. Because you don't respond to emails as quickly.
Yeah, I definitely, I'm working on the email. I had my inbox down to 37 about a week ago. Of course, now it's back up over 250. And
yeah,
it's just a matter of going in and this is where I block time. Like I'll block 30 minutes to go clean it out. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And getting stuff plotted into my calendar and that kind of thing. I'm working on it. I'm a work in progress.
So one of the things that you talked about, the email that you sent. So one of the things that SaneBox and Boomerang does is emails like that you can put in there that if you don't get a reply back in a certain amount of time, to put it back in your inbox. And that way your brain's not trying to remember and track these emails that you sent that you need a response from. It automates it for you.
Right. Well, so I sent that email on Monday and I've only heard back from you. So, I'm sure I'm not using SaneBox to its fullest capabilities. And that whole idea of, sane later, right? I throw it in Sane later and it sends it back to me.
But then Sane later gets so long. And so the reason I like the Gmail is you have a lot more flexibility. It's just once you leave the tabs and you go into priority inbox, you can customize it in all kind of different ways. And so for me, what works is I have the important, and again, I've trained Google that if, somebody sends me a message, that's where it goes. And then the starred, and that is if I see an email in either my down in the everything or in my important, and I click the star, it goes in there. But I also have a Zapier set up that if I star it, it'll go into my Todoist so that I'm tracking in there what I have to do. And then all of these other emails show up in this everything that literally it's different than SaneBox because you have to go into this Sane later, and there's all of this stuff. In my everything, it's the stuff I don't need to look at, where there's a difference in the priorities. And so it just so much stuff, all those newsletters and all of that. When I am looking for some downtime that I just want to read different emails or something, that's when I'll go look into there. Yeah. When I'm like, all right, I'm not going to be working right now, as opposed to if it goes into my inbox, it grabs my attention because those people are good at putting attention headlines that your brain can't help but not click on.
Right. Right. All right. Well, I'm looking at the time and it's 1:00. I know we started a little bit late, but NJ, you are such a joy. I mean,
Thank you.
I like you. What can I say? And I really do hope that, I hope that the members of our chapter watch this, because there were so many little tiny nuggets in here that even if they don't work with you, they're like, holy crap, that was a good idea, right? And it could be that, wait, now that I know. So thank you so much. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop the recording, and then I will upload it to YouTube after. It has to do something. I don't know what it does, but and I will talk to you soon. I know. Do I still owe you an email?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to get to that. So have a great day.
Okay, thank you. It was such a pleasure to chat with you.
You bet. Thank you. Bye-bye.